Tyrese Haliburton will be playing for a medal with Team USA. Andrew Nembhard in Canada will not be as they lose to France. What are those two learning and doing with their national teams with the Olympics now at the semifinal stage? And what recent Pacers news have you missed that matters going into next season? We'll talk about all of it today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Wednesday and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI. And today, the Olympics continued. I want to take a different angle talking about the Olympic play for the Pacers. Tyrese Haliburton, Team USA, did not have any trouble with Brazil, to put it lightly, although the second quarter was dicey for a second. I suppose USA won that game by a ton. Tyrese Haliburton's off to semifinals. He's playing for a medal. He is playing for a medal for the second summer in a row with the United States. Another chance at, as he calls it, no longer being a loser. Andrew Nembhard will not be playing for a medal. An upset in terms of what people expected, including myself. But if you actually watch the game and how the French approached it, maybe not. Maybe not actually an upset. What are Tyrese Haliburton and Andrew Nembhard learning, doing better, adapting to, and can they take these things to the Pacers? We'll talk about that today from those two games that we've seen. And then we'll hit some news that you might have missed that really matters as the season, the offseason hits a new point in August. So let's start with the winner. Tyrese Haliburton, the USA win over Brazil was never close, except for when it was for a second in the second quarter. 122-87, the final score. The second quarter where it was close, the United States, I keep saying the USA, won that quarter 30-15. There was a time when I think it was an 8-point game in the middle of that quarter. Yes, 34-42, and then it was double digits 15 seconds later, and it was double digits the rest of the night. So there was like a second where Brazil was making it interesting. It was not an interesting game. Team USA is certainly the favorites, even with the world getting better. They have an incredible team, and Tyrese Haliburton's a part of it. Now, as we talked about with Alex Riley last week, there are reasons he's not playing. It doesn't really surprise me, especially after Derek White replaced Kawhi Leonard. It made too much sense to stick with White because of the way this team is constructed with ball-dominant guys elsewhere, right? Even with that second unit, Anthony Edwards has the ball all the time, whether Tatum's in there, whether Drew Holiday's in there, whether a big who requires the ball is in there. There's a lot of guys who have the ball a lot already. So Derek White and his off-ball play and shooting and defense make more sense than a Tyrese Haliburton type. Haliburton played again. It was a blowout. It's the third straight game he's gotten in for garbage time. He played the whole fourth quarter plus a little bit in their last game. This time he played the final 8.5-ish minutes, 2 points and 1 assist. Stats aren't totally relevant. I don't want to rehash any of the discussion Alex Riley and I just had last Friday. If you want to know big picture what the role of Tyrese Haliburton or Andrew Nembhard on their current national team is, and stuff they can take from someone else on their team, both in terms of taking them to the Pacers as a skill and literally as a player, that was last week. So what we're going to talk about today is little skills that we've seen develop for these guys in these games. And it's not like they're playing so much that it's been so obvious, but I bring up the role of Tyrese Haliburton and why they're playing Derek White and this small, tweak of the bench group. Because remember, when I did the Brendan Rourke show and we previewed what this would look like, we both thought Haliburton would be in the rotation. Again, that was before Kawhi was officially out. And that was when he was playing like hefty minutes every game as the backup one. That was pre-Kevin Durant returning too. But it did change a lot for him. And I think that is where I would start, is in these games, Haliburton is learning more about being an off-ball player. And that is good and bad at times. The guy I would point to is the reason this matters, and the reason that you can see why these skills can, for a ball-dominant player, still have a ton of impact, is actually Devin Booker. Devin Booker, people who talked about Haliburton's minutes have said he should be playing instead of Booker, or something to that effect. A lot of people did. Devin Booker's been unbelievable for this team. He has been so good off the ball. When he's moving away from the ball, he curls around screens really well. He's still threatening with a shot and attacking the rim. He knows how to find the space. He knows when to cut. He knows when to move it from the corners and then relocate. In this game, he had 18. That led Team USA in scoring. He's been doing that a lot. And he's defended pretty well too, which has kept him on the floor and made him a no doubt going to play every game kind of guy. But in the NBA, he has the ball a lot, even on a Suns team that has Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal. But that they have those players. They have Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal. So he's had to, and this kind of started when they got Chris Paul, transform his off-ball game and abilities, and he's incredible at it. He's a great catch-and-shoot guy. When he turns and faces the rim coming around a screen, he's lethal. He makes good decisions. His shot is quick. His mechanics are the same every time. He cuts at the right times. Haliburton, in contrast, and this is not a knock on him, he should have the ball all the time. It is the best Pacers offense when Tyrese Haliburton has the ball all the time. He should. But Andrew Nembhard's good. He can pass. Pascal Siakam's very good. There are going to be moments where Haliburton should be, at least for like a possession or 2 or 5, whatever, off the ball a little bit, where he needs to cut at the right times, where he needs to take a screen off the ball into space and turn either towards the rim for an attack immediately or pop out into space for a 3 that we know he can make from watching him for years. Right, that's a valuable skill addition for him, especially, again, with Nembhard extended, because that might be their backcourt for a while. And that is what you've seen to me at least, from him in terms of skill growth. You know, in the 8 minutes he played in this game in garbage time, even he wasn't even like taking it up the floor that much, right? It was still other guards. Ant was doing it sometimes, for example, late in the game. So that is where Tyrese Haliburton, not taking a skill from another player who's elite at something, not taking a player to the Pacers, that's where he has developed the most to me, even in his limited, largely garbage time role, is he's playing with stars who are awesome on-ball creators. He has to, at times, run to the corner. And he had a great shot fake into a pass for his only assist in that exact scenario in this game to Ant Edwards, right? He popped out into the corner. A defender rotated off of him to help under the basket. They rotated back to Haliburton. When the pass came, he saw it coming. He flips it to Ant, 3. Right? Like, that's a good off-ball play. Keep it moving, recognize the read, and make a play. You've seen times where he cuts through the lane, which is just cutting through the lane. He doesn't get the ball in those very much. But he doesn't do that much with the Pacers, right? It's just an added skill for him to have. So I think the headliner for me of, if Tyrese Haliburton comes back better at one thing because he did this, it would be off-ball play. And it's not like that's going to be happening all the time for the Pacers, but I'll cite this stat again in the next segment. Like, Andrew Nembhard can pass. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander called him, the perfect player passer. And with the Pacers last year, Nembhard was at 4.1 assists per game, which doesn't sound very good, but Nembhard was at 5.7 assists per 100 possessions with Haliburton, 11.7 without, right? So almost double. So you can imagine that he is closer to a 7 or 8 assist guy if he has the ball all the time or is running the show or whatever. And so if that number can tick up, or he is on the ball a little more in a productive way because Haliburton can run off the ball, because he juices the Pacers offense even without being a creator all the time, that would be huge, especially if they can match the efficiency of Haliburton with the ball, because sometimes that's a problem for the Pacers. They only have one guy who can credibly create a shot for others. When we talked about their 3-point shooting after Haliburton's injury last year, it was all the time. No one could shoot because Haliburton creates the best threes for himself and others. If someone else can do that and allow him to be off the ball and still be a threat in all those ways, even if it may take a couple possessions of Haliburton brilliance away, if they can match that efficiency elsewhere because Haliburton's a better off-ball player, that's still worth it. So what I've seen in these games, again, Haliburton not in the rotation, but even the garbage time lineup for the Team USA has like an MVP and 3 All-Stars. He's learning to play off the ball. His defensive progress hasn't really been there. He's like better in the FIBA setting, like a lot of guys. You'd like to see a little more pesteriness on the ball. So I can't say that's the thing I expect to see him come back and be significantly better at, but I can say that I think as a ball mover himself and as an off-ball player, I've seen Tyrese Haliburton take some steps in these Olympic Games, and now he's got 2 more. I said earlier he's playing for a medal, and some people might be confused because they only made the semifinals, but even if they lose to Serbia on Thursday, they'll play in the 3rd, 4th game on Saturday. So they would play the loser of Germany-France in that game for a bronze. So he'll be playing a game on Saturday for a chance to win a medal, regardless of what happens Thursday. And again, he had that quote if they lost the Heat last year and he scored a bunch of points. Said, tired of being a loser. He did not medal last year with Team USA in the World Cup. They had a chance. They got to this exact stage, and then they lost 2 in a row, including one to Canada, who we'll get to in a second. I think this time they're obviously are the favorites in a way that wasn't so obvious last year. But I think that Haliburton would very much like to get a gold medal and make this the summer of Haliburton with the Eastern Conference Finals run with the contract with Team USA. But that's got to happen if he keeps playing well off the ball and doing well in his chances. Didn't miss a shot in this game, had an assist. It will feel very rewarding for Tyrese Haliburton and Team USA. You know who will not be playing for a medal? Stunner. Andrew Nembhard and Canada lose to France. Stunner, at least in the context of what I thought before the game. But there's a lot that happened in this game, and I want to talk about what we've learned about Andrew Nembhard from this Canada experience. Last time we get to talk about him because they're out earlier than many thought. Before we get to that, though, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. When your schedule is packed with activities and big work projects and plenty more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. Therapy can be helpful for anybody. It can be used for learning positive coping skills or figuring out how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. And it's not just for people who have experienced major trauma. So if you have been thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. You'll get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen, Locked On Jazz. The Lowry Markkanen resolution has come. Exactly what we predicted on Locked On NBA 2 days ago. I was talking with Matt more about it. Renegotiation extension coming. It's August 7th now, which means if he signs it now, he can't be traded this season, and it makes sense for the Jazz to do it. He's a good player. He will still be a tradable, very much tradable contract, even if he signs it. It's going to happen. The question is when, as has been reported by The Athletic. Very well, I might add. That Tony Jones, Anthony Slater, Shams Charania report about the whole situation was quite good. Mailbag's over, but if you want to hear about, speaking of big contracts, why I think Siakam's contract is tradable. If they needed to, they shouldn't want to. But I thought that was a very interesting question yesterday. That's the last one from yesterday's mailbag. Let's talk Andrew Nembhard and Team Canada. Nembhard came off the bench all tournament long, which makes sense. Shea's amazing. And yet that is where this shined through. Kind of the inverse of what we just saw with Tyrese Haliburton is that Andrew Nembhard can't have the ball that little. Today, France beat him 82-73. 10 points for Canada in the first quarter. They had 29 at halftime of this game. They finally were scoring in the second half. Canada won the second half by 7. They actually played pretty well for stretches of that half. But the French defense, with Gobert playing 4 minutes or something, was unbelievable. Matthias Lesort was awesome. Wembanyama's defense was incredible, even though his offense was not that good. And Yabusele and Ntilikina were shutting off guys getting into the paint, and they just looked awesome. Their defense looked incredible. Canada could not get into the paint, and that included Nembhard, who that was the thing that made it like, oh man, these Eastern Conference Finals games against the Celtics, like, earmark these, remember these, don't ever forget these. If this is Nembhard's turning point, it's because against the best defense in the NBA, he's just skating by Drew Holiday and Derek White whenever he wants and getting to the rim. He and many other guys, that was not happening. And when they did get a little sliver of space, there's Wembanyama and his crazy arms, and Canada would pass out of those and not get any good shots. And they didn't make their threes to finish punishing that, right? That kind of team can be beat with threes. They were 5 for 21 from deep. Altogether, it was a disaster, right? Nothing that really clicked for Canada in this game, and they're out. I couldn't believe it. I thought they were better than France. Their seeding suggested they're better than France. They beat France in a friendly, right? Like, people thought they were better. But this was the Olympics in France, so a home crowd, you could hear them very much so. France, desperate, changes their starting 5. No Gobert, no Fournier. Fournier hit some huge shots. Like, and Cordonier was amazing for France. He had 20 points. So lots of stuff went their way that did not go Canada's way. But like, Cordonier hit 1 3 fewer than the whole Canada team. But Canada still should have done better than this. They couldn't create in the paint. They only had 13 assists on 25 makes. That's not going to cut it. France had 19 assists on 20 makes, right? Like, that is more of what you'd expect in these kind of settings. So Canada's out. I thought they would beat France, but France had a very good game plan and the home crowd behind them. And Canada's done, and Nembhard is done, and he did not finish strong. He had an awesome third game right before this, where he had 18 points against Spain to help Canada survive that game and win their group to set up this game. And then today he played 15 minutes and he had nothing. No shot attempts. He finished with 1 assist, 2 turnovers, 2 fouls. That's his whole stat line for the game. And Jamal Murray had the ball way more than him. Jamal Murray took 13 shots. Gilgeous-Alexander took more. He should. He was good. He had 27 points on 19 shots. RJ Barrett had 16 points, 11 shots. That's good. Jamal Murray had 7 points on 13 shots, 1 assist and 3 turnovers. Right? Like that was an obvious pendulum swing moment for Nembhard. And if you listen with Alex Riley and I last Friday, we talked about this. It feels like those two guys just had backwards rolls the whole tournament. It felt like Nembhard should do more initiating and Murray should be off the ball trying to find wiggle room to score. And instead, it felt like Murray was initiating and Nembhard was resigned to being off the ball. And the best games for Canada had Nembhard in a blended role, where sometimes the plays call would come his way and he could attack, and sometimes he was asked more to space and he could make threes at a good enough clip. So him standing in the corner is still scary. And when they blended those as well as possible, Nembhard looked good and the team looked good. His defense was good. People were really hyping up how Nembhard played in that Spain game, and he, as they should, he was terrific. And so the big takeaway from Andrew Nembhard and what he got better at to me was in 2-guard lineups, how he should handle running the show, which didn't happen all the time. But when it was clicking, he was so good at it. They kept him in the game to do it with Shea. Shea was an MVP candidate. He should have the ball all the time. They're like, no, we need Drew Nembhard out there to do his own thing, to be involved in all this. And some of that's that he can defend, and that covers up for some other stuff. But the way he played as a guy who he had a chance to initiate, could actually do it, was pretty valuable. And so I kept thinking the whole tournament they would try to find a way to balance the guard rotation away that got Nembhard the ball just slightly more often, just a little, right? Never happened. Never happened. They tried it with Murray. He was good at times. He was like their leading assist guy for a while, but the scoring never really clicked for him. And I think they should have moved that pendulum more towards Nembhard. What does that mean for the NBA? Right? I just said the stat. I will say it again. Last year, Haliburton on Nembhard assists per 100 possessions, 5.7. Right? That's not that many. It's a good number, but not like a lot for a guard. Without Haliburton on the floor, 11.7. That's very good. That's a very high number. We have NBA evidence that Andrew Nembhard can create like this. We also have now international team notes that say, hey, one, if he can get to the rim still all the way, he's really good in this hybrid role. The one you saw in the Eastern Conference Finals, not a fluke. But if he's in a situation where he can't touch the rock enough to get involved and actually like be impactful and figure out where he can find crevices and make plays, Andrew Nembhard is not as impactful in those roles. So that leads me to believe that if there's a reality, which is totally possible, where this year he is 4th in the pecking order among the starting 5 behind Haliburton, Siakam, and Turner, they need to get him point guard reps with the bench because that would get him those touches and allow him to blend being a very good initiator and guy who should be running the show at times with being a backcourt partner in crime for Tyrese Haliburton, who showed that he needs to do some off-ball stuff, and Nembhard showed that he needs to do some on-ball stuff. Feels like, again, they don't want to take the ball out of Tyrese Haliburton's hands, but just a little bit of blend and pop and pizzazz from those two working together was a clear takeaway from these Olympics that could allow the Pacers to just be slightly better at maximizing that duo. And all the time throughout last season, they'd make a starting lineup change. They'd get back to Nembhard with Haliburton. I think they will again. And so those two skills in tandem, in cahoots, whatever you want to say, I think will be a defining takeaway from this Olympics for me. Is if this season starts and Nembhard's whipping a pass every game next year, whoa, what was that? That was awesome. Or if Haliburton has, oh my gosh, he's shooting 47% on catch and shoot threes and he's actually taking one every game. Like that kind of stuff would be important progress. And I know everybody says Haliburton needs to defend and learn that, and I'm sure he is. Or Nembhard needs to be better at XYZ. And yes, he probably does. But these little things, especially as they work together, will be my lasting memory, at least unless something dramatic happens in the next 2 games for Team USA, of what Tyrese Haliburton and Andrew Nembhard did and learned in this Olympic setting. Unfortunately, no more chances for Andrew Nembhard. Canada's out. That's crazy. Shea took it on the chin very well and actually spoke to reporters after the game. I appreciate that from him. And it's a bummer that Canada's done because I thought they were among the best teams. But if you listen to Locked On NBA on Monday, I did say a different team was the biggest threat to Team USA over Canada, despite many people liking their NBA talent. I said Germany, and Germany's got a good shot, although the home crowd for France was unbelievable in that quarterfinal game. Can't wait to see all these games. USA plays Serbia. I should have said that on Thursday for the third time of the summer. They played in Abu Dhabi and then again in the group stage and now in the semifinals. Let's close this out with some Pacers news you might have missed and why it matters in terms of a player saying something or a player doing something or whatever. Let's talk about that to close out today's show. Before we do that, though, let's talk about FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much I never wanted to stop. That's why I've loved these Olympic basketball games. But as the playoffs are done in the NBA, they're wrapped up in the NHL, we get fewer games. We get fewer sports, especially once the Olympics are done. Right now, it's baseball in the Olympics because the WNBA is on break. W comes back. Olympics ends. It's all a bummer. When the sports aren't sportsing like we want in the summer, FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want and are available. All you have to do, open the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus every single day. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer on FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen, Locked On Warriors. They did not get Lowry Markkanen. Now what? Now for Golden State. Have fun with Steph and some young guys. I don't like that aspect of their team, although they did have a good offseason from a value perspective, and I think they'll have a lot of credible players. That makes their floor higher than it was last year, even though their ceiling is probably pretty similar. New host of Locked On Warriors. You can learn a lot about that team from a new voice over there. We'll talk about Haliburton and his final Olympic tally and other Olympic takeaways next Monday, because the Olympics will be done, and then we'll be done talking about games for a while, which is pretty crazy. But it's off-season time. So let's talk about some off-season stuff that's happened, stuff that's been interesting to me, and that stuff that matters from a roster perspective and all that. One is about Mojave King. Do any of you remember him? 47th pick in the draft in 2023 by the Pacers. He said after he got picked, yep, I'm going overseas. I want to find the right home for me. And that home happened to be the Indiana Mad Ants. Very rare. He was injured, so it made it a little more sense that they share facilities. That made it make some sense. Didn't work out. He didn't play very well in the G League. If you have been astutely listening all offseason, when I talked about two-way contracts before the draft, a long time ago, over a month ago, I said, maybe think about Mojave King. Just think about it. That was dumb because in April, Mojave King signed for the coming season with the New Zealand Breakers. He's playing in Australia, really New Zealand, in the NBL next year. So he's not with the Pacers, but because he signed another pro contract, they still keep his draft rights. They still have them. The older he gets, the less likely he ever comes over. But Mojave King, that is the deal with him. He did play for the Mad Ants again last year, so G League rights owned by the Pacers, perhaps a two-way candidate in the future. Who knows? This will be a big season for him and his growth. And the Breakers play two NBA teams in preseason action as a part of an agreement with the NBA and the Australian League. So Mojave King will play against NBA players before the season starts. That actually could be worth watching, but a little unlikely. Casey Tominaga, coming to the Pacers on an Exhibit 10. He played for Japan in the Olympics, which is why he wasn't with the Pacers for Summer League or their summer practices. He's out. They went 0-3. They almost beat France, which again makes it all the more stunning that France beat Canada. But they're out. They went 0-3. And he talked to Basket News about, one, Japan and them getting better and how he thinks they're closing the gap with the teams. And two, upcoming time with Indiana and in the NBA. He said, I'll prepare for the NBA this summer. I just got to show every day that I can accomplish my dream and get into the NBA. So I'm very excited. I would imagine that on Exhibit 10, he's going to end up with the Mad Ants. I don't even know if he'll participate in camp or not. We'll see. But what I do think is that he has the shooting ability to be interesting at that level, but he's got to be a little stronger. So I'll be fascinated to see what happens with him. That's his reality. Japan is out. He's done. Pacers the next step for him. Tyrese Haliburton, speaking of him, we talked about him for a while already. He had an awesome profile from Andrew Greif in GQ. Really good stuff. Really good quote about Haliburton thinking about a parade in Indianapolis if they ever won a championship. Really good quotes from him about his status as a player. The two standout parts to me were, one, that he felt like the Pacers were getting overlooked, right? He mentioned that all these pundits, talk about Philly and Milwaukee, and I'll find the quote, but Philly, Milwaukee, Boston, why not? We were just in the conference finals. Why not us? That was his part of his general thesis for it. He said, all I keep seeing is who's going to win the East, Boston, Milwaukee, New York, or Philly. It's like, what are we doing not being included? But again, we're Indiana. People don't even know. People didn't even watch us play until the playoffs. So if we want to gain that respect, we've got to keep having success as a team, and it's coming. And I actually agree with everything he just said. But he also mentioned his own goals for this year. And Classic finds any reason to be Betty. Tyrese Haliburton said he wants to be great, of course. And he said that I'm coming to this year, and whether it's the case or not, viewing it like everybody thinks my success in the first half of last year was a fluke, and I've got to prove it again. And some of you who are listening to this or comment on this podcast on YouTube are in that group. People thought that was fluky, even though he'd been a 40% shooter before. So we'll see what the real level of Tyrese Haliburton is after the off time between the Olympics and the season. But I think he's right to have that chip on that shoulder. People have said that it was fluky, even though he shot that well for a while in his career before that time. It's a very good story. You should read it, by the way. Chase Budinger, if you remember him, congrats for the bonus points. Pacers player in 2016-17, athletic forward, 6'7", pretty good, went to Arizona. He is in the Olympics for beach volleyball. This has very little bearing on you listening right now and very little bearing on the Pacers as a team, but it's sweet. It's so cool that he was good enough at both sports. I was reading profiles on him that he got scholarship offers from UCLA and USC to play both basketball and volleyball. He went to Arizona for basketball. So just a stud athlete. Even after he retired from the NBA, after 8 years in pro hoops, he still got calls from beach volleyball players like, yo, you want to come do this instead? Like, that is remarkable about his athleticism and ability in both sports. And he is an Olympian. He's playing for Team USA. He might have been eliminated by now, but he played for Team USA in beach volleyball. I thought that was a fascinating story. Some really good reporting from the Indy Star and ESPN about that. Last thing, look, there are a lot of people who have opinions on James Johnson because there's a lot of he should be an assistant coach and all blah, blah, blah. I don't want to get into that too much. You all know my take on that, which is it means something to practice with the guys. I think guys listen to you more in that case. But what I also heard recently is on 2 different episodes of Draymond Green's podcast, he talked about James Johnson being this like mega valuable player for the Pacers. On one of them, Jeff Teague was there. Jeff Teague played with James Johnson at Wake Forest, and they both just love James Johnson, right? Draymond said the most feared man in the NBA, having him around allows them to just ball, right? Like, that's fascinating to me. And plenty more from him on a different episode where he says one of those valuable players, the Indiana Pacers guy who does not even play in a game. And then went on to talk about James Johnson, the swagger he brings, and the fact that he makes other players feel like they're protected. Haliburton, Nembhard, etc. The guys he specifically mentioned. And he said, Draymond said of James Johnson, he's the exact reason Nembhard acts the way he does. I know the confidence that he has in the court, the demeanor he walks around with, that's backed by something. James Johnson, a feared man, a very popularly good teammate in the NBA. And that is why they keep signing him and not having him be an assistant coach. It just is different when it's a player versus someone else. And James Johnson's on the team. And that is all I have for you today. Lots of great stuff, Olympics and more. We'll have 2 guests to close it this week. Josh Lloyd one day, talking Pacers season preview adjacent from a fantasy basketball perspective. And the other one will be Dustin Dopirak of the Indy Star. We haven't talked in a while. We're going to look back at what we said last year would be the biggest storylines for the Pacers. And we'll see how we did on that. And then we'll look ahead at what this year's will be. There's fewer because of their shorter, and by shorter, I mean less involved offseason, but still plenty of stuff to actually break down for this Pacers team heading into another season. I'm on Twitter at Tony R. East. That's the best way to reach me and the most likely way I'll see it. If you need something, the show is there at Locked On Pacers. If you want to see what the topic's going to be before you listen to the episode, a lot of people do that. A lot of bookmarking. It's a great way to do it. If you're on YouTube, thanks for watching there. Getting better at the whole face on camera part, although not really. And comments, best way to reach me on there. Tomorrow, guest, what order of those 2 guests will be TBD. Thank you all for listening today. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you very soon.